All right, so today we're going to be moving into chapter 2 in statistics, which is an entire unit on describing data or information. And so how to organize data. And so that's what chapter 2 is all about. And if we review a little bit, unit 1 was on inferential studies and descriptive studies. So inferential studies is, remember, where you take a sample, a survey from a sample, and then infer it to an entire population. And a descriptive study is simply taking information from an entire population. And then we have experimental design, where we impose a treatment on at least two different groups, a control group and the control group and the experimental group. And then an observational study is just where we observe differences within two or more groups. And so that was unit 1, and now we're going to be moving into unit 2, organizing and summarizing information from descriptive studies. So we're going to kind of stay with this idea of descriptive studies, which is just kind of summarizing information. And then how do we summarize it? What are the tools that we have to summarize studies on a population? And so there's 5 different lessons in this unit. The first lesson is classifying variables and data, and then we're going to talk about qualitative data and quantitative data, and how do we display information with those two different types of data. We're going to talk about shapes of data, which is called the distribution of data. And then we're going to look at how misleading some graphical displays can be. All of this will be in Unit 2. So let's go ahead and get started with the first lesson, variables and data. And we want to start by just talking about what a variable is, a characteristic that varies from one person or thing to another. So it could be somebody's height, it could be their weight, their eye color, their number of pets. Anything that is different from one person to another would be a variable. And so variables can be broken into 2 different categories. There's a category of qualitative variable. A qualitative variable is probably the best way to describe it is a non-numeric value. So for example, somebody's eye color would be qualitative. Something that's not a number, okay? So that would be an example of a qualitative variable. A quantitative variable is simply that something can be described with a number. Your height is a number. Your weight is a number. The number of pets you have is a number. So that would be an example of quantitative, a quantitative variable. Their favorite breakfast cereal would be qualitative, because that wouldn't be something that would be described with a number. So then we have quantitative variables, have really 2 different types. The first type is what is called a continuous variable. It's just, there's no break in the action. It could be your height or your weight, something that just could be on a scale. I could weigh 130 pounds or 131 pounds or 132 pounds. I can weigh 130 and a half or 130 and a quarter, or 130.1 or 130.11. So that's a continuous scale. And then there's something that's not continuous, and if it's not continuous, we call it discrete. So possible values can be listed with only a finite number of possible values. For example, the number of pets you have. You can have 1 or 2 or 3. You can have 30 or 50. But it wouldn't make sense to say you have 2.5 or 2.25 or 3.2 number of pets. You either have 2 or you have 3. And so that would be something that's discrete. There's breaks in the scale, and that's a discrete variable. So here's a real quick description of what we have. We're talking about variables. Variables can be broken into 2 different categories: qualitative, which is not with a number, and quantitative, which is with a number. And then if it's quantitative, it can be discrete, where it's not continuous, and then it can also be continuous. So the same way we talk about variables, we can talk about data. So data are values of the variable. Okay, so the data can be qualitative data or quantitative data. We can have discrete data and continuous data. So the variables are the specific things that vary from one person to the next, and the data is the numbers within that describe those values. So let's take a look at some examples. So here's a good example of this, looking at one particular event, the Boston Marathon. Shadrach Bawat was the top male U.S. runner in the last Boston Marathon, and Desiree Linden was the top U.S. runner. Okay, so that's qualitative variable. Okay, so you're either a female or you're a male runner. You're described as one or the other. A lot of times the qualitative is called categorical. You're placed in certain categories. Your eye color would be a category of eye color. Your favorite breakfast cereal would be a category of breakfast cereal that you like the best. That's qualitative data. So then we can go on and we can say that Shadrach finished third overall in the marathon, and Desiree finished first for the women overall in the marathon. That's qualitative data, but it's discrete. Okay, you can finish first, you can finish second, but you can't finish 1.5 or 3.6 place. It's either first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. That's all discrete. Then we can say Shadrach's time was 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 35 seconds, and Desiree's time was 2 hours, 39 minutes, and 54 seconds. This is all true, by the way. This is also quantitative, a quantitative variable, quantitative data, but it's continuous, because we can say, we could be more specific than 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 35 seconds. It could be 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 35.5 seconds. So it's a continuous data. It could be rounded so that it looks discrete, okay, but it's still a continuous measurement. All right, so take a look at blood type. I have a O negative blood type, but these are the 8 different types of blood types that each person has. A positive, A negative, B positive, B negative, and so on. O negative is considered the the donor, so anybody can take O negative blood. The bad thing about being O negative is you can only receive O negative blood. My body would reject the other 7 types. But if you're AB positive, you can receive any type of blood. So it's good to be AB positive because you can receive anybody's blood. But if you're O negative, man, they want you to donate your blood a lot because anybody can take your blood. So what kind of data is that? Well, that's qualitative data. There's no values there. It's just different categories of your blood type. Here's another one. The U.S. Census reports that the U.S. household average is 2.53 people live in every house in the United States. Well, what kind of data is this? You got to be careful on this one. It looks like it's going to be continuous because it's 2.53. It could be 2.54 or 2.56 or whatever, but that's an average. It is quantitative, but it's discrete. Okay, even though there's a variable there, or even though there's a decimal point there, what it's describing is something that is discrete. You can have 2 people in your house, or 3 people in your house, or 4 people in your house. The average could have a decimal in it, but it's still a discrete variable. And then finally, the highest waterfall in the world is Angel Falls in Venezuela with a height of 3,281 feet. It's over half a mile. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So this is over a half a mile long. It's the highest waterfall in the world, and that is a quantitative continuous variable. So that is assignment 1, and we're going to be moving on to qualitative data when we move to assignment number 2 in our next lesson.